Welcome to the World United. Welcome to the World United.
So Christopher Sellers is Australia's leading expert on creativity and creative skill sets. Over the past 15 years, Christopher has consulted, developed, and coached for a kaleidoscope of industries, from the BBC and Netflix to intelligence and telecoms, working with leaders invested in optimum critical skill sets, cultures conducive to creativity and leading ideas. Disruption forms change. It's time for a shift. So welcome, Christopher, to the stage, and we're looking forward to learning the 6 critical creative skill sets every organization must understand.
Thanks,
Over to you.
It's a tough act, 4 tough acts to follow, but I'll do my best. All right, so I'll start from the start. My background as a professional actor, playwright, screenwriter, and I got a bit of a break optioning projects to BBC 4 and Netflix in its infancy. I've worked with Warner Brothers. I tend to describe my career as 15 years of hopscotch between corporate and creative. My background's in education and L&D, so I turned script writing and this sort of assessment to cognitive and needs-based assessments, which is how I sort of kept a foot in both. Started developing role-play scenarios for the government and private sector, sort of stumbled into working for intelligence and designing puzzles and scenarios for them, which became the sort of foundation for my book, which is coming out probably next year. So that gives you a little bit of background of where I'm from and what I do. And having sort of diversified experience, creativity gets thrown around a lot, but no one really seems to know what it is. They all believe they think we should have it and we need to do this thing. It's incredibly hot right now. Pandemics just kind of brought it out of the woodwork. But I'm going to sort of challenge our notions of what we think it is and how it behaves. So I'll go into my little talk and pull up some notes. So look, when we talk about creativity, it immediately conjures images of temperamental artists in funny hats. You know, we can't reliably employ creativity unlike mathematical or scientific formula. Yeah, it seems like a talent. It's just not a skill. It's dependent on genetics or personality. The other issue is it seems entirely subjective, right? We believe that it can't be quantified or validated, unlike something like economics or law, okay? So we tend to throw creativity into the arts bin, like creativity is for artists only, and it kind of sits there in the corner. So the problem we have then is if we observe the current global demand for creativity and creative skill sets to solve complex problems, to adapt intelligently, to compose anything original. If creativity is magic and esoteric, then are these traits ever going to be achievable via mere mortals, right? Let me just put my headphones in because my lovely neighbor has decided he'll get his leaf blower out right in the middle of my talk. All right, so here we go. So yeah, is creativity tangible, you know, to the rest of us humans? Now the answer is yes, except your understanding of creativity, creative skill sets, and creative process needs to be seriously adjusted. So this is what I'm going to talk about. And the example that I use, and it was the subtitle for my book for a while, is Why Can't Architects Dance? Now, an architect is creative. We understand that. They've got a sense of composition, of innovation and design. Yeah, they can understand abstract concepts. They can visualize a plan in 3D. Yeah. So if an architect is creative, then naturally they'd be able to choreograph a dance routine because dancing is creative. So we recognize the false equivalence, but you'll be surprised how often this logic is used to try and describe creative behavior. Yeah. So we recognize that an architect has a different set of skills to a dancer who has a unique independent set of skills, right? However, what we do recognize is traits like innovation, composition, adaptability, and originality are flexed for an architect in their design. And similarly, traits like innovation, composition, adaptability, and originality are employed for choreography. Yeah? So by breaking creative process down into tangible skill sets that can be learned, developed, and improved, you start to sweep away this sort of mysticism and confusion around creativity and creative process. It also starts to dismiss a lot of the elitism that's starting to creep in around, you know, innovation in terms like design thinking, which is something I'll talk about another time, right? But this leads into the second issue, which is actually an issue of translation. So if we go back to our architects, and if I have one floor plan with the same conditions, the same time frame, and the same budget, and I give it to 5 different architects, I'm going to receive 5 very different home designs, right? Now, this is a unique gift of creativity, is that it allows you to observe the same information within the same parameters and draw out a unique outcome. Yeah. So a floor plan, 5 different designs. Consider that, you know, Shakespeare's collective works have been around for 400 years. But even with an identical script, you would have never have seen an identical production of the same show twice anywhere in the world, for instance, right? So imagine if you can apply this trait, these insights to strategic decisions, to data analysis, to risk assessment, to innovation and solutions, right? You're with the same information within the same parameters. How can you find that thing that no one else could and draw out a unique outcome? Yeah. So this is the sort of, this is who I work with. These are all the organizations and C-suites and everyone else who are looking for these key insights. The challenge right now is not access to information. Information is abundant, it's accessible, and it's free. The challenge is not what you think, but how. So when we all have access to the same information, it's the individual that can process it in a unique way to draw out a unique outcome. And this is a purely creative ability, right? Now, the problem with this process is that when this trait, this behavior is observed by a layperson, if they see 5 different home designs, if they see the painting on the wall, if they see Shakespeare performing, they look at it and go, oh, it's subjective. They look at the outcome and there's, I can't do it, it's magic. I can't do what artists do, right? The other issue is the model of assessment, right? So if the input is standard, so if I give you the same design, the same conditions and time frame, right? Mathematics, science, and a model of productivity all dictate that if the input, the conditions, and the process are standard, then the output will be standard. For creative process, when the input is standard, the conditions and the process is standard, but the output is variable, this translates as a risk, outlier, an anomaly, an error, or a fault, right? It's, even though it might be original and creative and by design, at first glance is dismissed as a mistake or just, it's magic. Like they don't recognize it, right? And a lot of what I talk about is applying a linear model of assessment to what is a personal and abstract process doesn't make any sense. And you only observe superficial outcomes. It's a language that you just don't understand. It's the equivalent of applying English grammar to the French language. It doesn't make sense. You're best off learning French and being bilingual. So the 6 creative skill sets, I've identified some, and I'll walk you through them just to give them a little bit of an overview. You should begin to see how they apply and how they're relevant to you. I might very quickly share my screen for fun, just to throw up my little GIF. I'll put this in the chat, maybe, so you guys can have a look at it. No, it makes me add a file. Maybe not, I don't care. All right, share my screen, do this thing, and pull up the 6 creative skill sets. Here's my GIF. Okay,
So I'll leave this up here for the moment, and that should say right in the middle there, it should say arrange elements to achieve the most desirable outcome. But if you want to take a screenshot of that, either it's all over my site as well, so you can have a chat to me about that. So here we go. I'll give you a quick overview of each and how they, and a description. So the innovation is the first. We'll start there because it's the easiest to recognize, to improve existing tools, systems, or process. We're all familiar with it. It's super popular right now. I'll tell you the issue with innovation alone. Like innovation independently has two Achilles heels. Number one is if the dominant system is flawed, you're still bound to it. You know, so legal, medicine, tech, they're all examples of like these massive existing systems that are constantly being adjusted, but fundamentally there's massive flaws that need to be adjusted. So everyone loves Bezos 1%, you know, innovation. You know, it doesn't mean anything if what you're working with is fundamentally flawed. The second Achilles heel is if you're working with systems that are interdependent, quite often with tech, yeah, you start tinkering with one, you disrupt every other one and the system crashes. Okay, so innovation alone by itself isn't sufficient, but it's helpful, okay? The second one is problem solving, all right? And this is simple, super simple. Mechanics do it all the time. You know, fix what's broken, restore it to its original state. I won't go into too much definition here. I did a workshop earlier at 10, which is probably recorded. And so there's a 25-minute video where I break this down a bit more comprehensively if you're interested. So moving along is composition. Composition is the third, and it's to arrange elements to achieve the most beneficial outcome. Now, it sounds a bit abstract and probably too artistic, but if you understand symmetry, then you understand composition and design. If you understand musical notes and how notes create chords, which can be layered to create harmonies, then you understand composition and design. A technical example is coding and conditional logic. So do you need 50 independent data points in order to get to the information that you need? Or can we compose 4 or 5 either or questions to take our candidate through to get to the information that they need? Yeah, so to arrange elements to achieve the most beneficial outcome. The next skill set is adaptability. And our friend Rashid talked about it a little bit earlier in terms of reacting intelligently to change. So there's 2 particular definitions. That's one of them. The second definition of adaptability is the adoption of alternative sources, right? So the ability to look outside of your bubble to understand how other people do things and adapt what's necessary. In terms of reacting intelligently to change, similar to Rashid, the exercise that I based my book on, I designed what was essentially an escape room for intelligence candidates because they wanted to assess creative skill sets. And 90% of the candidates failed and only one passed. And it's similar to COVID, to be honest. It replicates being put in a scenario where the standard ways of doing things do not apply. So how can you cope, right? How can you creatively adapt intelligently, manage risk, make strategic decisions under pressure in real time? So that was really, really interesting. For what it's worth, you can download the first chapter of my book from my website. It's all there. The fifth skill set is originality. So to create something new that's never existed before. And originality is interesting because it's an ethic and a discipline, and we achieve it in the opposite method for how you would assume. We normally think it's inspiration or something that hits us, makes something original, and it's the opposite. In order to create anything new, you need a rather informed opinion of what already exists and what's come before you. Yeah. So genuine originality, originality that is effective and useful, is actually developed from deep introspection and research. So by exploring your subject, that's where you discover the fringes of what's been done what's possible, what might not be, and it also allows you to critically assess what already exists. Yeah. In business, it translates to key point of difference. Like, what are you doing that's new? Like, you copying an Uber model doesn't make you innovative or original. It makes you functional. Yeah. And so these terms get thrown around a lot. And so part of the fun for me is to go, no, that's not what that is. And if you say that you want these things, here's clearly how to go about it. The sixth emotional skills, critical creative skill set is emotional intelligence. So empathetic understanding of alternative points of view. Now, it's no surprise that in the current demand for problem solving, innovation, all these sorts of things, in leadership and everywhere, there's this demand for emotional intelligence and empathy, in resilience in teams, in, especially in COVID, where our standard way of working has been disrupted. So now how can I understand and still connect with my team who are remote and not immediately accessible? I won't go too much into this because it's a delicate personal development. I touched on it a little bit in the workshop, but fundamentally, genuine emotional intelligence comes from exploring all of the emotions on the spectrum, not just the polite ones you share in a HR feedback session, and understand how they affect you in your body and the behavior they manifest. Because if you can understand that for yourself, then other people's behavior isn't so threatening. Yeah, and you can connect on a humane level. Interestingly, a lot of my early work was designing role plays for surgeons to retrain them in empathy, because 5 years of intensive medical training trains them to detach from the body and to view it like a machine with moving parts. Now, that's a fantastic a critical technique in terms of surgery and doing the work, not so helpful when it comes to bedside manner or dealing with next of kin. Yeah, not so helpful when you look at their personal and professional lives. And we've already talked about the rate of suicide and drug and substance abuse within the medical field, and the standards and the pressure being so high. It's a massive, massive factor. So that's something. So these are the 6 that I most commonly work with. And by approaching creativity in this way as tangible skills that can be developed, it demonstrates how they may be learned, developed, and also applied universally. And while you might identify like these skills may be used intuitively or even independently, your optimal outcomes are achieved when we have a confluence of these 6 creative skills. And that's what I talk about when it's like optimal creative thinking, skills, process, and outcomes. We're looking to achieve a confluence of these 6. So that's my chat. Thank you for your time. And I look forward to discussing all of this with you in the rest of the session.
Thank you so much, Christopher. Thank you for demystifying some of the, the halo around creativity and, making it more approachable. And it is not something that is so out there, aspirational, but it's something we can all bring into our lives and into our organizations. Thank you for that, Christopher. And I would like to share the certificate. Just a minute as I pull it out. The World United presents the Certificate of Speaker to Christopher Sellers for being an esteemed speaker in Global Transformation Festivals 2021 Australia. And I present this to you on behalf of Dr. Yugandhar and Grandma Parisha. Thank you.
Thank you, Kwanto, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much.